one more act for you tonight. Very exciting, one of my best friends in the world, and you're going to have an absolute ball with them. It's your last chance to go really nuts and applaud. So when I say their name, I want you to give it absolutely everything. Enjoy the heck out of this last one, but please, go nuts everyone, for Georgie Lush!
Hello. I'm very excited to give this talk tonight. This is a conspiracy theory that has had me be dumped 3 times. So it's very exciting to be involved with this. And I just want to point out, I got dumped 3 times not because they disagree with me, but because normally this presentation is 3 hours long. William Shakespeare. Have we all heard of him? Quick poll. Good man, bad man? Mediocre man. I like it. I will be selling t-shirts after the show. Little thing. These three men. Just ignore that woman in the front. These 3 men, what do they have in common? We got this man siphoning fuel. We got this man being a creep. And we got this guy. I'll tell you what they all have in common. They're all fucking criminals. William Shakespeare, well known for being an incredible writer, but do we know of his crimes? Shakespeare's crimes are long and multitudinous. Just made that word up. In the vibe of Shakespeare. His first crime, pretty fun, drugs. I'll get into that later. Second crime, less fun, plagiarism. The ideas. It comes in 2 parts. Third crime, plagiarism, entire works. Yeah, he won't stop at just a concept. And the 4th crime, and I'd say the worst crime of all, terrible husband. So we're going to look in detail of these 4 crimes, and as I said, I've already used 2 minutes. We're going to look in some detail these 4 crimes. First of all, the fun stuff, drugs. Yeah. So researchers found in William Shakespeare's home after he had passed away a pipe that had some remnants of weed, cocaine, and nutmeg. And let me tell you something that I didn't know before this. Nutmeg is hallucinogenic. So, a bit of harm reduction. Please don't go home and smoke nutmeg. There is a process to it. Maybe just Google it. Lots of scholars are kind of thinking, so you found a pipe at Shakespeare's house. Does that even mean that it was him that smoked it? So we got a few different points of evidence here. Shakespeare was kind of written and quoted about by his peers for being quite the pipe smoker. He was, of course, an actor and a writer. And if you don't think that an actor and a writer smokes, get real, okay? But one of the most compelling piece of evidence comes from Sonnet 76. Now, I'm just going to read a little bit out for you. Just a little bit, though, because I know Shakespeare's not that well enjoyed nowadays on account of the 3 people that dumped me. So Sonnet 76. Why is my verse so barren of new pride, so far from variation or quick change? Why with the time do I not glance aside to newfound methods and to compounds strange? Now, for those of you that thinks that's all a bunch of gobbledygook, he basically just said, I do drugs. Why write I still all in one, ever the same, and keep invention in a noted weed? Noted weed, I presume he's meaning a big fat bong. So, we know Shakespeare was a bit into the drugs, and can we blame him? I mean, most artists create things under the influence of something, whether it be depression or cannabis. But let's look into his more kind of fateful crimes, okay? The plagiarism. This is when it gets pretty serious. So Shakespeare is kind of well known for writing lots of our great works, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, and all of these stories have been recreated time and time again. Look at Hamlet, you see it in Lion King, you have As You Like It, Much Ado About Nothing, which we see in 10 Things I Hate About You, rest in peace, Heath Ledger, still not over it. But what if I were to tell you that these well-known, loved plays that are often attributed to Shakespeare creating them were actually him just regurgitating stories that were already written centuries before? Let's start with Romeo and Juliet, a well-known play, a well-known story. Shakespeare actually wrote this between 1591 and 1595, so approximately 4 years to create. That's important later. But the first kind of Romeo and Juliet, the first iteration, was actually in 1298. It was first referenced in Dante's Veroniosa Montecchi, which I know I've said that completely wrong, but I don't think he's here tonight. Now, Dante referenced two warring families that were fighting with some star-crossed lovers who fell in love and tragically died. That story was then created again by Matteo Bando in 1530, and that was in Italian as well. And that story was pretty much exactly Romeo and Juliet. And then again, the tragical history of Romeus and Juliet was written in just 1562 by an English writer called Arthur Brooke. Now this chap was around in London and Stratford-upon-Avon, and William Shakespeare then came up with the bright idea in 1591 to come up with a completely interesting original idea called Romeo and Juliet. Now I know some of you are thinking, look, come on. It's not necessarily the idea that he created and birthed, it was the way he wrote it. Well, let me tell you about the changes that William Shakespeare made to the story of Romeo and Juliet. In the original story, Juliet is but 16, and a most notable change he made, he went, not young enough. So he changed the character to be 13. Funnily enough, his daughter Susanna at the time was also 13, so he wrote this weird fanfic about his daughter falling in love and killing herself. I don't know really what to make of that. And I have ranted for too long about that. Let's move on to Hamlet, okay? Hamlet, again, another story Shakespeare wrote between 1589 and 1599 and 1601. So it took about 3 years to create. And once again, this story was written not in the 1200s, in 1200 AD. It was a Scandinavian folk tale, originally kind of passed around verbally, so there's no real kind of original author that's attributed to it. And it was originally called Amleth. And Amleth translates to, roughly in Old Norse, a mad king, okay? And this story featured a ghost that was wanting revenge or avengement from a king that had been killed. So again, a pretty similar kind of story. Another thing to note is Shakespeare's son, who died when he was 11, was called Hamnet. Hamnet, like a shitter version of Hamlet. It's not really related to my conspiracy theory, but I just wanted to point it out. Then we have Midsummer Night's Dream, and A Midsummer Night's Dream has lots of origins from English folklore. It was first kind of, the idea of it was first kind of introduced in a Latin poem called Ovid's Metamorphose, and that featured magical beings. It featured Theseus, Pyramus and Thisbe, who were characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and it also featured a fairy queen called Titania. Other ideas that were kind of created or stolen for A Midsummer Night's Dream is lots of English folklore had people displeasing fairies and being turned into donkeys. That was a very kind of common thing. We also had Chaucer's A Knight's Tale that featured the story of Pyramus and Thisbe? No, wrong. Duke Theseus, who married his Amazonian bride. So lots of these stories were kind of cherry-picked, or aspects of these stories were cherry-picked by Shakespeare to create his overall kind of story. And the fourth one is also A Midsummer Night's Dream, because I have a real bad attention to detail. So we'll move right along. So we know kind of Shakespeare took ideas and inspiration, as we like to call it, from other works. But let's have a look at his entire works, okay? Throughout his lifetime, he wrote 36 plays. He wrote 154 sonnets and 2 really long poems, okay? His writing years, his first work kind of happened between 1589 and 1591, okay? And he died in 1616. We don't know for sure when he finished writing all of his works. Like, we know some were published posthumously, but we can really see there that he had 192 works in total and about 27 to 25 writing years, okay? Bearing in mind that Romeo and Juliet took potentially approximately 4 years to write, Hamlet took approximately 3 years to write. And a little known fact about Shakespeare's time is writers wouldn't write the entire play because it was quick fire. So writers would give the actors a page at a time that only had their lines and stage direction on. So if you imagine that Shakespeare was writing multiple plays at the same time over a period of years and writing the actors' individual lines on separate pages and giving them out to people, and he didn't have enough money to have someone writing copies. So quite often, if you gave Hamlet his lines, Hamlet would have his lines, and there would be no other copy of that work. So it's kind of pretty inconceivable to imagine that he was writing Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet all simultaneously and creating 192 works within 27 years. That would mean that he would have to write 7.1 works per year, which is about 1.3 plays or 5.7 sonnets per year. Or he's simultaneously, this is where I lost people, okay? I distinctly remember about 3 a.m. in Wellington in about 2014, watching this boy's lights go from behind his eyes as he's like, what have I done? Who have I brought home from the club? I had this whole presentation, you know. But yeah, it's important to note that it's a huge undertaking, okay? And I just don't think it's really that conceivable. Oh, fuck, I'm already at 13 minutes. Possible victims, okay? We have Anne Hathaway, his wife. She was called Anne Hathaway. That's a great gag. If I set it up earlier, it would have been fantastic. Christopher Marlowe, he's Shakespeare's peer. And then we have Francis Bacon, okay? There are a lot of feminist undertones in Shakespeare's work. You know, we have Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing. We have Portia, who is a literal lawyer that saves the day in A Merchant of Venice. We have Amelia, who is, I would say, a feisty feminist even for today. And if you think for a second that a man in 1599 had a grasp of how smart women were, I don't think so. I think it was this lady over here, okay? But we have Francis Bacon, and I'm just going to give one kind of piece of evidence that supports the Francis Bacon theory, which is in 1867, a man came into Francis Bacon's office. Francis Bacon was a high-powered kind of like duke at the time. And he was a great writer, a poet, a philosopher, but obviously a person of high status wouldn't be able to write the most controversial pieces like Shakespeare wrote. Anyway, someone came into his office, he was long dead, and they found a bound documentation that had original copies of Richard II and Richard III with scrawlings all over it with the words Francis Bacon and Shakespeare just hundreds of times. And there's a bit of a conspiracy that Shakespeare never even existed, okay? There's a bit of a conspiracy that Francis Bacon created this idea of Shakespeare so he could write his naughty little words without losing his job. Now, some people might think this is a bit crazy. I don't. Shakespeare famously had inscripted on his grave, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Because of that inscription, and because of the Church of England, no one has ever actually opened up Shakespeare's grave. They've done a scan and they can see that a skull is missing. But no one has ever actually laid eyes or seen DNA of the supposed Shakespeare. Final thing, terrible husband. When he died, he left Anne Hathaway in his will, not his best bed, but his second best bed. So we're supposed to believe that the biggest romantic man in history, when he died, left his wife just a shitty old mattress on the floor? For his crimes, we find him guilty. Thank you, and I apologise for going so over time.